Well, good afternoon, everybody. If this is your first event, welcome to the Cove and Kilcreggan Book Festival. My name's Jenny Brown. I'm a literary agent based in Edinburgh, and it's a special delight for me to be able to chair two writers I work with, Penny Johnson and Raja Shehadeh, in this event that's been sponsored by Literary Tours of Egypt. We're going to be talking for about 45 minutes, and we'll have a time for questions afterwards. Very, very keen to hear your questions at the end, so please be thinking about what you'd like to ask these writers. But in the meantime, to introduce them, Raja Shehadeh is Palestine's leading writer. He's a lawyer and human rights activist. He's the author of a number of highly acclaimed books, including the Orwell Prize-winning Palestinian Walks. His work has been translated into 23 languages. The Observer says of his writing, Shehadeh's books are like beacons held up against the darkness. Penny Johnson is a founding member of the Institute of Women's Studies at Birzeit University, a contributing editor of the Jerusalem Quarterly, and the author of Companions in Conflict. Let's welcome them to the presentation. I think you must be the furthest travelled writers of anybody at this event. Partners in life, they are also partners in writing with this acclaimed new book, Forgotten, Searching for Palestine's Hidden Places and Lost Memorials. It's a profound meditation on memory and what we choose to memorialise. In it, the authors set off from their home in Ramallah in the West Bank to search for the hidden or neglected memorials in historic Palestine, now Israel and the occupied territories. From a pre-1948 neighbourhood in Jaffa, raised for a seaside park in what is now Tel Aviv, to the ruins of a Bronze Age city that has become the nickname for an infamous Israeli checkpoint, Raja and Penny set out to retrace Palestine's material history through decades of alienation, displacement and loss. Penny, I just wondered, before we start to talk about the book in detail, I wonder if you can say something about the importance, both of Gaza and West Bank, over thousands of years of Palestine as a cultural crossroads and its civilizations.
Sure. One would think that this small slip of land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, to be called a crossroads might be an exaggeration, but indeed it is not. Even in our sort of parvenu town of Ramallah, which was only founded in the 19th century, if we walk across the road, there's ruins of a Byzantine monastery and tombs where the first Christian martyr, St. Stephen, is supposed to be buried. Down the road, there's an Iron Age settlement. Up on a hill, there is a Bronze Age ark. But perhaps the most telling example of a crossroads is the most isolated place, a place we were not permitted to go. We haven't been able to go since the 1990s, which is Gaza. Gaza has a 4,000-year civilization. It's on the Via Maris, the way of the sea, that travels down to Egypt. It's been a thriving port, agriculture, civilization. Everybody has been in Gaza. Phoenicians, Philistines, Egyptians, Romans, Byzantines, Mamelukes, and even the Brits. In fact, there was a very well-tended war cemetery for British soldiers that is now partially destroyed in the genocidal war, as are many. As you probably know, I will not list all the cultural monuments, but let me just say St. Phosphorus, the oldest Christian church in the world, partly destroyed. St. Hilarion, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, partly destroyed. El Omari Mosque in Gaza City, pretty much destroyed. 8 archaeological sites, important ones, buried under the rubble. So the list is too long to say, but I think attention to recovery. And the Gazans are pretty resolute about this. If they can manage their own destiny, they will start rebuilding some of the monuments. Don't you think, Raja?
Absolutely.
So we're talking about a place that has got huge, ancient and more recent history that you've been setting out. Can you tell us about the starting point for the book? What made you set off on these explorations from your home in Ramallah?
Well, we were going on a walk after COVID on a dusty road by the wall, the separation wall, the apartheid wall, which Israel built partly in Palestinian land, making it impossible for villagers to go into their lands to cultivate. And we came upon a plaque, a small plaque with the Egyptian flag and the names of two soldiers who had died in the war of '67. And we were wondering, how did they get to be in that area near Latroun, near Ramallah, on '67? Because we knew that they came into Sinai, and there were many soldiers killed in Sinai, but we didn't know any who had come to that part. And so we were curious, and we started investigating, and we found out that even the historians didn't know about this. And only at the end of the book did we discover the full story, and I will leave it to you to read, which is a very fascinating story about the immense destruction and mass graves and so on.
And secrecy.
And secrecy, yeah.
Yeah, this is a teaser. Always good to have.
After that discovery, how did you decide which other places and hidden monuments you wanted to find?
You know, we were not going about it as with a book in mind. We did not want to build a book from the beginning. We just wanted to visit places that meant something to us, that there was a relationship to us with them. And so, for example, we went to the Khan Tujjar, which is a Khan and a place that we had visited in '89 with a geographer to whom the book is dedicated, Kamal Abdel Fattah. And we wanted to see it, what happened to it then. And we wrote about it. And so slowly the book was building up, and then we started going into places which we were curious to know about, and discovered them and wrote about them. And we saw a possibility for a book as we went along. And so it was an organic development.
I mean, and over what sort of period were you making these discoveries?
A year plus.
A year,
A
yeah.
year plus. And some of them were difficult. The Khan Tujjar, which was a major site for caravans from Damascus, from Istanbul, merchants from Nablus, everybody. It had mosques. We could hardly find it. And nobody knew where it was anymore. It was buried in these gigantic thorns.
And it was established in the
Much
16th
taller
century.
than us.
Yeah. It was established in the 16th century and had been in use for 4 centuries continuously. And the Israelis didn't bother to put a plaque to announce it.
There is a small plaque that said this site was last cleaned in 1989. I mean, this was also a theme. Sites are entirely unprotected, particularly Islamic sites. People have gone to the High Court to say that the same protection that is afforded to Jewish holy sites should be afforded to Islamic holy sites, and it's been rejected each time.
Yeah, it was rejected.
You quote that wonderful T.S. Eliot line, "Old men should be explorers." And you quite rightly, of course, replace men with people.
I don't think T.S. Eliot would have liked this.
how much of your explorations were kind of prompted by being at this stage of life and also being conscious that the younger generations won't know events and history, which is, as you say, just being erased?
You know, the fact that in '89 we were able to go to this Khan Tujjar with the geographer Kamal Abdel Fattah, to whom the book is dedicated, and he took us on a trip to all of Palestine, all historic Palestine.
With university students from Birzeit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Who can now not move.
And since then, they cannot move, and the West Bank is closed off from Israel and from Jerusalem, and all these places are inaccessible to them, to the people in the West Bank. And so, so many people who read this book said, we didn't know about these places at all.
Rajesh, you describe walking in the hills in your 2007 book, Palestinian Walks, and at that point you were encountering a vanishing landscape. Can you just talk about how much has changed in the last 20 years and describe some more about the challenges of making these explorations?
Terrible things, because so many more settlements have been built since the Oslo Accord of 1993. And the Oslo Accords divided the land into 3 sections, A, B, and C. And C was the largest area of more than 60%. And the Israelis, under Israeli control. And the Israelis thought that because it's under Israeli control, then if they settle in that area, they will not be forced out. And so settlements increased 4-fold after Oslo. Oslo was supposed to bring peace, and it did exactly the opposite. And so settlers have increased, and they were not as violent as they are now, because now the government in Israel is a right-wing government, and the settlers have a lot of say in the government, and the police is under the Ben Gvir, who is a settler himself. He lives in a settlement, and he allows the Israeli police to do anything they like, and he doesn't charge anybody for violence against Palestinians, and the army is involved in the settlement violence. So the hills have become inaccessible, because anytime you go to the hills, you are attacked by settlers. And so it's been very tragic for me not to be able to walk in the hills that I like so much. And some of them, they're still able, you can still walk, but you always fear the settlers attacking. And settlers' attacks have resulted in over 100 deaths of Palestinians.
So, in other words, a lot of those walks that you describe in Palestinian Walks, 20 years later, you would not be able to complete them.
Partly because settlements have been built on them, and the land has been taken over for the future expansion of these settlements, and partly because the settlers are violent and they carry arms, and they're ready to use the arms against Palestinians, and they've attacked Palestinian villages as well in order to force them out. And they forced out about 34,000 people out of their villages in order to take them over and build settlements there. And the Jordan Valley, which is a very fertile area, they're intentionally clearing every Palestinian out of that area so that they can use it for themselves, for agriculture and for building settlements.
And where have those Palestinians gone when they've lost their land?
Well,
everywhere.
They have gone to other villages, and some of them those who from Jenin and Tul Karim who were in the camps went to the schools and lived there, and it's a chaos. It's very tragic.
And Bedouins who are also being displaced and their animals killed and chased out of every place by settlers, including in Wadi Kelt now.
Yeah, Wadi Kelt.
Just keep moving and trying to find a place where they can just settle.
But to farm, to put down, olive trees, which has been such an important crop.
So many olive trees have been cut, 3,000 at one point, and many more at other points. They're just cut.
Yeah. And olive oil is a very important part of our economy too, so yeah.
And people who are trying to take the olives out from the trees have also been attacked, and so they have not been allowed to pick their olives.
In the book, we describe going to Ras Karka, which is a beautiful, what's called a throne village. These were sites of Ottoman rule, and it has a restored castle that a wonderful organization in Ramallah for architectural preservation has rebuilt. But the town is just under siege. You can see settlements in all directions. The kids have trouble getting to school in a nearby village. It's just, a series of problems. It just keeps rolling on.
You have written about the Ottoman era mosque, which has all but disappeared. We're talking about the Eco Centre, which is failing now because American aid has been withdrawn from it. You describe a well-managed nature park, which is built over the ruins of another villages of another people. What was your most surprising discovery?
For me, the most surprising discovery was the park, and the fact that I had driven over from Tel Aviv to Jaffa over this road, and never realized what was underneath it. And underneath it was an entire neighborhood of Jaffa called Benshiyeh, which was destroyed and in order to expand the land and build the park. And it's Charles Clore Park. It's funded by British Jewish philanthropists.
Oh yeah, yes, Clore Foundation.
Yeah. Billionaire, yeah. Okay.
And people are enjoying this park, oblivious to the fact.
Oblivious, and I was oblivious myself. And then I realized that it was underneath a cemetery of a whole cemetery.
And of course, your family history is Jaffa.
Yeah.
And in the park, there is a museum for Etzel, the people who are the Menachem Begin party who attacked Jaffa and drove the people out. And in that museum, they have a plaque which is a speech given by Menachem Begin to the fighters, saying, "Treat the Palestinians with compassion." And I thought, what compassion?
No, treat women
And
with
children.
compassion. Because he says, show no mercy.
He doesn't use the word Palestinian.
Yeah, he says, show no mercy.
But treat them with compassion. And I thought, what compassion when they have had to leave and their life destroyed forever?
That must be particularly poignant given your family's home in Jaffa.
Absolutely. And then to realize that immediately after they left, looting started and were not stopped by the leaders in order to implicate as many number of people as possible with the crime of looting.
I mean, you just describe some of this in your book. We could have been friends, my father and I, about leaving Jaffa thinking that you were all going to return.
Yeah, my father was working on the return until 49, 51, 52. And he didn't, I don't know if he realized that Jaffa was looted to the bone while he was working on the right of return.
What about you, Penny?
Maybe mine's a little more cheery. We were going to visit a Sufi shrine to the north of Ramallah when the neighboring villages said, you can't go there, the settlers are attacking everybody. But they said, but there is another Sufi shrine down by the highway for Nabi Ayub, the prophet Job. I should say that a lot of Sufi and Muslim shrines also honor Old Testament figures, for example. And we had seen this little gray building as we zoomed on the highway in the middle of a dusty parking lot. So we went, it's locked, of course it's locked. And then this wonderful woman with an orange hijab, Zaher, came over her garden gate and said, I have the key. And Zaher had been taking care of the shrine all by herself, cleaning it, making sure it was working for several years. And she told us, what happened is Job and his wife, Job was totally strung out, skin diseases, all sorts of things. They stopped, there's a spring nearby, and he just said, I can't go on. And then he saw a featherless bird go into the spring and come out with feathers. So he put himself in the spring and came out as a 14-year-old boy. I sort of think much to his wife's surprise. So Zaher said, this is Sabr Ayub, the patience of Job. And I thought, what I learned is this is the patience of Zaher, who all by herself is protecting this monument and taking care of it. And I thought, that's what I learned.
Yeah.
I just want to add that along the road, exactly there were billboards with Hebrew advertising apartments in the settlements for the Israelis and a huge amount of money and sale.
Oh, yeah, this is a luxury settlement.
Yeah.
They vary.
The monuments or places you visit also include a railroad. And I wonder if you could, that lovely reading.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Oh, I will, and Risha will continue. But I do want to say something about the Eco Center, just because I enjoy it. He's a hydrologist, and he's did all sorts of work on the Eco Center. And when we went, it had been closed for 2 years. And he said, COVID. Risha asked, why was it closed? And he looked at Risha like, why?
Don't you know?
But then he said in the same breath as COVID, Trump.
And this was the first,
Yeah.
Trump's first outing
but-
as president.
No, he cut
Like this
AI
one,
he
yes.
cut out
Yeah.
AID,
Yeah.
Agency for International
Yeah.
Development this time. Okay, so this is actually after we had visited Khan Tujar and we were recovering from the thorns. And we went to Haifa. Oops, we did go to Haifa. Which was a stop, the end stop on the Hejaz railway that was coming from Istanbul and Damascus. And another site of crossroads, pilgrims, merchants, everybody. And we are visiting, I'll say, as we looked at the ruins of the Khan, we were haunted by the words of Khalid Farani, a resident of Haifa who teaches anthropology at Tel Aviv University. We had been standing on the lovely porch of his father's house in Haifa, which abuts the Baha'i Gardens. Yeah, another great site of crossroads. The Haifa Bay was spread out below. Khalid told us to look straight ahead. There, he said, you can see Ras Nakura, the gateway to Lebanon, that is now sealed and inaccessible. Then he pointed to the northern and said, Syria is right there, and on clear days, you can see the snow packed on Jebel al-Sheikh, Mount Hermon. Then he added, with a heavy heart, to think that I have relatives in all these countries, but I have never been able to visit. He said this with so much grief, as though that calamity had only just happened, his pain as raw and the lament deeply felt. With Khalid as our guide that day, we strolled to the remnants of the old Haifa train station and saw the pillar commemorating the Hejaz railway line, which opened in 1905. The train brought grain and other goods from Syria to the Haifa port, traveling along the same Via Maris route used by numberless camel caravans in earlier times. All gone now. This region was once interconnected, enriched by the interaction of various groups and ethnicities who came together in such places as Khan Tujar or Haifa, where the railway brought migrants to work from as far away as Istanbul, as well as thousands of Muslim pilgrims passing through Haifa for the connecting train to Syria and onward on the Hejaz line to Medina. But there was also another important railway line that we wanted to investigate. Do you want to read now, Asha?
After visiting Khan Tujar, we were pained by the complete neglect of a site that had brought together people from all over our region. We wanted to explore more lost connections, and so we drove to Ras Nakura to inspect the place where, prior to 1948, the railway line crossed from Lebanon to Palestine, taking the cable up to the white chalk cliffs towering over the open sea. We were joined by both international and local tourists. Bizarrely, the site is also surrounded by barbed wire that goes all the way through the lapping waves. There is something perverted about wire and fences attempting to confine the open sea. We walked through a series of spectacular cave grottos, partially filled by sea water, before going through a tunnel along the remains of the railway line. We stood before a photo of a train going through the tunnel. The British-built tracks were still visible, and the sign read, Beirut, 120 kilometers with an arrow north, and Jerusalem, 270 kilometers with an arrow south. Beirut was closer to us than Jerusalem, even if wholly inaccessible nowadays.
Visiting this site We asked ourselves what the tourists who come here were marveling at. Is it the mystery of what lies beyond? Did the tourists realize that had there been no border, they could have enjoyed villages in a gorgeous landscape? And who knows what mixture of cultures would have developed? I'll read a bit of Batir then.
Yeah.
Recently, a friend from the Palestinian village of Batir, near Bethlehem. This place also has UNESCO World Heritage Sites for its terraces. Told us how during the 19 years of Jordanian rule over the West Bank, the Israeli-run train from Jerusalem to Jaffa passed through the village lands, but on the other side of the border. The villagers could only dream of the train trip they were missing and of the sea at the end of the line. When the train passed, the children stood on the side of the barbed wire fence and watched. Then, after 1967, the Israeli Train Authority decided to allow the train to make a twice-yearly stop at Batir and let those villagers who wished to do so ride the train to Jaffa, a practice that continued until 1986. And what an exciting event it proved to be. All except the most elderly and infirm took advantage of the opportunity. The preparation for the trip began a week earlier, with parcels of food and pots filled with delicious dishes made ready to take along. Almost the entire village boarded the train, leaving a veritable ghost town behind, for who would willingly miss such a great opportunity? No Israelis were allowed to take the train that day. Except for a few soldiers, the train was filled with the villagers from Batir. When it stopped in Jaffa, they all got out, filling the streets of the city and the beaches of Tel Aviv, with their chatter, walking around as though they owned the place. Their little adventures provided ammunition for discussion and gossip for the rest of the year until the next ride. We'll just go from there.
No, fine. No.
Batir is now secluded behind the wall, and no trains stop for the villagers. We never had the chance to join them, and in fact only realized how much we relished train travel when we began making the journey from Edinburgh to the Scottish Highlands. We were saddened that the opportunity to travel to surrounding countries by train had ended in 1948. The establishment of Israel in that year severed the lines of communication between the different parts of the Arab lands, in the Levant, and beyond it, to the Hejaz and North Africa. Should we do this?
But then one Saturday in 2011, we arrived at Nablus train station, a low, thick-walled stone structure, in time to board the 3:20 p.m. to Jerusalem. Some 20 passengers were waiting at the entrance, mostly young men and women, with a few people old enough to remember the days of train travel during the British Mandate over Palestine. The excitement was palpable. It was our chance to take a ride to Jerusalem, a city most were barred from visiting, bypassing the Israeli checkpoints along the way. As we entered the station, a porter in a dark blue uniform issued us a ticket on the green line. The journey would take 30 minutes and with stops planned at the Hawara, Zatara, Uyun al-Haramiye, Atara, and Kalandia, all were now checkpoints. We made our way to the waiting room. It was barren except for low tables with a brochure entitled Palestine Connected, showing local train nowadays networks and their destinations, Gaza, Jaffa, Haifa, Beersheba. Soon there was an announcement in Arabic and English. The train would be arriving in 3 minutes. We could hear it approach, all whistles and honks. The sounds grew louder and louder until they became deafening. Then they subsided. The train had arrived. The doors of the waiting room opened, and we were invited to step out onto platform number 2. The train was waiting, shrouded in rising smoke. We surged towards its doors as they opened for us, but there was no getting in. The train was a beautiful, momentary mirage that soon dissipated after the image projected onto a screen mounted for the far side of the wall went blank. It was an art installation entitled Palestine Connected by the Palestinian artists Ayad Isa and Sahar Qawasmi, set in a pickle factory that now stands where the Nablus Central Station once was.
Just after the train disappeared and the screen went blank, the fictitious passengers on the fictitious platform number 2 were overtaken by wistful disappointment. An older man, who seemed to be holding back tears, lamented the passing of, quote, those days when we could take the train and travel freely from city to city.
Such a beautiful, poignant passage that, and shocking.
Shocking, yeah.
And the idea of these villages being allowed twice a year to get on that train.
And not anymore.
Yeah,
And then no
that
more.
was only till the 1980s. Now they are behind the wall completely.
There are young men in some villages which overlook, they can see the sea in the horizon and sometimes smell the sea because of the wind coming their way, and they've never been able to visit the sea because they're on the West Bank.
Like Rentis, where you can go up on the wall and see the sea.
It's tragic.
And the idea of your friend standing there, seeing the different, being so close to the different countries with
And
his
not being able to-
relatives,
yeah.
and yet never being able to visit.
Yeah, yeah.
The chapters where you set out to find a memorial to the Nakba, those particularly striking. And as you write, not a celebration, but a remembrance of absence. The erasure of over 400 Palestinian villages and the exile of 750,000 Palestinians in 1948, 1949, and the disappearance of Palestine itself. What did you discover? This is this huge world event. What did you discover that was...
We went to the Galilee, which is, of course, where most of the 400 villages had been destroyed. And we had heard that there was a memorial to the Nakba in Kilcreggan. This is a very beautiful town in the Galilee, of course, where Jesus turned water into wine. Most welcome. And we walked and we walked, and people said there and there. And we finally found a pillar that memorialized people who had died, but didn't use the word Nakba. And what had happened is when there was the anniversary of the Nakba some years ago, local Arab councils wanted to memorialize the Nakba, but were threatened that their municipal funds from the Israeli government would be taken away. So they were fearful. So this wonderful poet, whose village was destroyed, Safaria, and who then moved to Nazareth, Taha Muhammad Ali, who I cannot recommend too highly, says, our traces have all been erased, our impressions swept away, and all the remains have been effaced. There isn't a single sign left to guide us or show us a thing. And that's what we found. Except, maybe in Kafr Beram, where it's a different kind of...
Except in Kafr Beram, which was a village, a Maronite village, that was not involved in the fighting in 48. And they were told they didn't get involved in the fighting in order to stay in the village. And the army came and told them to leave for 1 week, and then they will be allowed back. And so they left. And they were never allowed back. And they went to the High Court to claim that they must be allowed back, and they won. And the minute they won, the army came and destroyed all the houses from the air.
Yeah. In 1953, aerial bombardment.
Yeah. And we were staying at a hostel in the Galilee, and the man at the reception was from that village, and he said that every Saturday, because Sunday is a working day, they go and pray in the village, in the church in the village. And we said, it's very nice, we would like to go and pray there. And we went there, and we realized that they had renovated the church after many, many attempts at getting permit to do this, and did it perfectly. And it's a beautiful church, renovated in the midst of calamitous destruction of the village. And you want to continue?
And also in the midst of an Israeli national park, where on Saturday there is a young woman who allows you not to pay. So we went to the church. Maybe I should just read. By the way, even Golda Meir, the prime minister, acknowledged that the villagers of Kufr Biram had a case, that they had a justified case. But she said, we do not wish to set a precedent. So a precedent for justice was not allowed. And earlier, Ben Gurion had this really brilliant idea to move Kufr Biram villagers to Argentina. And he moved a few families, but most people stayed and made these immense efforts to rebuild. So the church service, we paused before the church as people were hurrying inside. This is me. I haven't been to a church service in several years, Penny whispered to Susan. I hope I still know how to behave. We entered with our heads slightly bowed and slid into a pew. The church, destroyed by an earthquake on New Year's Day, 1837, and rebuilt in its current shape in 1926, was vandalized by Jewish settlers in 1949 and 1951. Its walls were cracked during the 1953 bombing, and the church bells stolen soon after. Having finally received permission from the Israeli authorities after many fruitless petitions, the exiled people of Kufr Biram began renovations in 1972. Before that, Palestinians in the Galilee were under military rule and needed a permit to leave their place of residence. Today, the renovated church was full of light. It was beautiful. The priest, in his robes and purple cape, began his sermon by marking the month of Lent. He told the story of Jesus curing a blind man when Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem from Jericho. In a melodious, deep voice, the priest assured the congregation that the time would surely come when those who are blind would have their eyes opened and be able to see the light. His reading of this episode from the Bible mixed phrases from the original Aramaic with Arabic. As we left the church, and I should say, the church was full of teenagers, which is, I think, very unusual for a church service. When we left the church, we asked Charbel, that's our friend, how he felt to have his village turned into a park. He said, it pains my heart. But then he added with a hardly audible whisper, as though he didn't want to be overheard, we don't lose hope. And indeed, on the outside of the courtyard, there is a mosaic in Arabic that says, we shall return. It's an amazing place. And we didn't really know about, we sort of knew vaguely. We didn't really know about it, did we?
We didn't, no.
Yeah.
But so the generations have returned to the church?
To the church on Saturday.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they live in a crowded village next to it.
Yeah. The cumulative effect of reading this book is illumination about this beautiful land with its rich history, but immense sadness at what's been destroyed, the lives which have been lost, but also, rage that this has happened and has been allowed to happen. And I just wonder, how do you keep sane? Going through these journeys and seeing such devastation and knowing the recent history of what's happened. Can you have hope at all?
Well, the journeys, in fact, helped because they gave us a wider vision of the land and also a sort of idea of a usable past, not a nostalgic past, not like how great it was then, but a usable past that perhaps can serve us to think about the future, at least think about the future for other generations, not ours.
Talk a bit more about the idea of a usable past.
A usable past is not one that is like, oh, it was much better then, but oh, I'm standing in Khan al-Tajar and I'm imagining, it's also an act of imagination. I'm imagining all the people who have passed through here. I'm imagining Evelyn Shalaby, the wonderful Turkish 17th century travel writer, standing and saying the three mosques are like three beautiful girls twinkling. I'm also, of course, since my book companion, I'm imagining camels too.
Yes.
Quite a lot of camels. So it is an act of imagination rather than an act of nostalgia to see that it could be like this. The connections could be reestablished. What do you
And I think we
think?
take a long-term view now, that it's not going to happen maybe in our lifetime, but it will happen eventually, that the land will be returned to the way it was before, connected to the rest of the region, because it's artificial now. It's impossible to have a place that is unconnected to the Levant, the whole of the coast, and eventually it will return to being connected, but it will take time. And things are happening now that give us hope, I think. I mean, there is destruction of many aspects of Israel that will not make it last the way it was before.
When you stand, as you're going to the Jordan Valley, if you stand at a particular place, you see the Great Rift Valley, which goes from the Taurus Mountains to Mozambique. And all of a sudden you realize that people have been traveling on these sites for millennium, and that it's there and connected. So that's all we can, I think, hope for.
And the present situation, I wonder what your thoughts are about this fragile ceasefire.
There's no ceasefire.
Yeah, I think our main hope is that there really would be a ceasefire, because about 300 people have been killed in Gaza. And I think maybe you read just yesterday, 2 boys, just boys. They were out searching for firewood for their father, who was in a wheelchair, and an Israeli drone killed them. And it just happens every day.
Every day.
So there is that direct idea that really it's not a ceasefire. It cannot be a ceasefire when people are killed every day. And then there is the plan. It's very Mexican. I don't know what to say.
The Trump plan is not workable because it gives Israel all the last word on security and everything. And Israel is now already dividing the Gaza Strip into 2 parts along what they call the yellow line, and they want to do some things on the part of the Gaza Strip which is in their hands fully, and leave the other parts. And that's been the plan all along. When they were in Lebanon after the war, they made the South Lebanon and gave it to the Haddad forces, who was a collaborator. And now they're trying to give the part of the Gaza to Abu Shabab, who is also a collaborator.
And a drug dealer.
And a drug dealer. And it never works at the end, but they keep trying.
So,
What can you see the role of the international community? I mean, you know, we've had marches, we've written to MPs. What, you know, I just wonder, you know, in this hall, what advice would you give to us who are feeling appalled and at the moment helpless?
I
to
think
watch this going
eventually
on?
what people have done has made some difference, because it has impacted their governments to some extent, and there's much more to go, but it is a beginning, an important beginning. And it also is important to realize that what's happening to us in the West Bank and in Palestine is only the beginning of a trend. So, for example, the organization that I started, Al-Haq, has been sanctioned by Trump. And the sanction of Al-Haq means that it is almost killed. They cannot do emails, they cannot get money, they cannot pay their employees. They're paralyzed. And that's a beginning of a trend that is not going to affect Palestine only, but to affect the world.
yeah, because the sanctions on Al-Haq are because they presented evidence to the International Criminal Court. And perhaps you read that one of the French judges on the International Criminal Court is sanctioned. He can't use his bank accounts. Poor man, he tried to do something on Expedia.
And he couldn't.
And he couldn't. And he is a judge appointed to an international court. So I think, what we are saying is the consolidation of certain kinds of power globally is frightening for everybody, I think.
But the fact that young people are realizing that they have to fight and struggle because the struggle is theirs also is very important, I think.
Yeah.
And it will bring results. And it has already brought some results.
Raja, you speak as if there is some hope, that you're finding some.
Yeah, I think there is hope because it cannot go on like this. It cannot go on like this.
Measure is known as an optimist. I'm not sure.
But I know in the past you've just made a distinction between optimism and hope.
This is a Terry Eagleton distinction. Optimism is really when you think things are going along and it'll just get better. Hope is when times are entirely dark. And I think, yes, it's hope, it's not optimism.
Shall we take some questions? I know we've got a reading that we'd like to have at the end.
Okay, sure.
But in the meantime, I wonder if there's anybody would like to ask Penny or Raja and think, yes?
I just wondered, when we see the settlers being interviewed, even those that are trashing West Bank villages, there seems to be a high preponderance of American voices. Why is that?
Americans are good at settling, I think. I don't know, you are right, but there is a great encouragement for Americans to come and settle. There's right-wing movements that bring them over. And the US passport is handy. Otherwise, I'm not sure. It's a good question.
Just wanted to give Jim some exercise.
Yeah.
We probably can hear you without a microphone, but
Yeah.
Thank you very much for what you've been telling us. I wanted to ask you a personal question. See if you can remember the name of the person who took you to Baram from Tabaria. Wouldn't be by any chance Ridwan Shehadeh?
No.
No.
Sherbil.
Charbel. Yeah.
Ridwan
He
is the
didn't
one who took me to Baram because his family were from there.
Oh,
I used to be the director of the Scottish Centre in Tiberias.
I see.
Where we stayed.
We've stayed there a number of times.
Anybody else? Yes.
Thank you so much for coming here today and sharing with us some of your work. And I feel completely inadequate to ask a sensible question, but we did have a speaker yesterday, a BBC journalist, who was talking about the importance of eyewitness. And I think you are giving us that importance and, don't stop doing what you're doing. And thank you very much. But I wondered, perhaps related to your hope, where are the forces for good? I think we need to know what's going on. We need to know the bad things that are happening and to condemn that. But where should we, as in an international sense, be looking to that are the forces for good that are seeking to drive positive change?
I mean, there are groups inside the country, like Standing Together, that are trying to defend the Bedouins. There's a number of Israeli Palestinian activists that are trying to protect villagers. There is the Physicians for Human Rights that have produced the evidence on torture. There is Bet Selem, an Israeli human rights organization also that calls it genocide. And so there are they're sort of overwhelmed by the right-wing trend in the Israeli society, but they are doing important work and certainly deserve our support.
Yeah, but the problem is that there is so much refusal to see the facts in Israel. They have been committing genocide and they refuse to admit that this is what they've been doing. And so this is very distressing. I wonder if Gaza is opened and the siege is ends, that they can see the destruction firsthand and realize what a tragedy they have caused people, entire nation, and whether this will turn them around and make them become human again and see the common humanity. I wonder.
Yeah, I'm sure you know at the moment, no international journalists can get into Gaza. So one relies on the really astounding bravery of Palestinian journalists that keep producing news. But without people able to go, we are all reliant on.
Somebody has said the Israelis have double consciousness. They know and don't know. And that is, I think, absolutely true. Because it's not, the television screens do not show the destruction in Gaza. And yet there is a lot of social media, there's a lot of international media that they can see if they want to. And maybe they do, but they don't register. And they have a double consciousness, knowing and not knowing. And that's how they save themselves from feeling guilty.
And I think the knowing, not knowing, this was also coined by our friend, the Israeli sociologist Stan Cohen, who wrote about denial. He's now passed away, South African. He was in Israel, but he couldn't take it. And he took it from South Africa as well, and Germany. You know and you do not know.
I wanted to ask what's it like for you in Ramallah, which is not free from trouble at all, but I mean, can you is daily normal life possible at all, or are you just glued to the news all the time and to emails from friends who are in trouble? Can you give us a picture?
Partly this, partly that, but I think the Palestinians have learned by now to insist on leading a life as routine as possible. And even during wars, you realize that people have to lead lives of normal things. Marriages happen and parties happen and so on. And it's necessary to keep on going. Otherwise, you will not be able to last.
Yeah.
And especially with young people. But I should say also that people keep creating. There was good news today in the Palestine Museum, which is near Birzeit. There has been a standing exhibit called This Is Not an Exhibit, which has taken art. People have donated whatever art they have from Gaza. It's a wonderful exhibit. And it just won a huge Best Museum prize, didn't it, yesterday? So people keep creating.
And it was a combined effort of so many people.
Everybody
worked on it together. And people keep thinking of projects like this to keep going and to support the people in Gaza.
And I'm thinking about the book that we were talking about at the Edinburgh Book Festival. Is it Daybreak in Gaza?
Daybreak in
yes.
Gaza.
Could you maybe say a little bit about that for anybody who doesn't know about it?
Well,
how that's come together.
It is Mahmoud Mouna, who runs the amazing educational bookshop in Eastern Jerusalem that we all rely on.
Which was attacked by the Israelis.
Yeah. The police confiscated a copy of 1984. They're really in tune. And actually, they confiscated a book we did on women's studies that was really about weddings, because it had a picture of a bride going through a checkpoint. In any case, Mahmoud and Matthew Teller, well, mostly Mahmoud collected narratives from Gaza, and not just from the war, from before the war, from people's lives, from artists, from doctors, from all sorts of people. So it is a book you can dip into, and it gives an idea of Gaza that is multidimensional. And I think that's its strength. Yeah. And it's been doing very well. They're going to translate it into German, which is kind of a surprise.
Yeah. Anybody else want to ask? Yes, a question here.
No, thanks a lot for sharing your experience today and for sharing your eyewitness reporting to everyone in this room, especially when, yesterday we had our speaker from the BBC who was so good and said so many wise things, but also could not seem to apply the wisdom that he's learned from places like Iraq to the situation we see in Palestine today. But you said where there's hope, that there's signs of the Israeli regime also suffering and cracking a little bit, as we see a lot of international attention on it today. Do you think there is a tide shifting in Israeli society because of what's happening in Gaza just now, or the patterns we see today are just going to continue?
It's the question we all ask ourselves, I think. Benjamin Netanyahu is mainly concerned with the next election and everything he does, and also staying out of prison. Everything he does is calculated, including trying to exclude the Arab parties from the election, because they would have enough seats to do damage to his coalition. So there is that level of just any politics that is about survival. Then there are the ideologues like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, that when, for example, the two people in Jenin surrendered to the IDF, to the Israeli army a few days ago with their hands up, they were shot and killed. And he said all terrorists should be killed. There is that kind of extremist position, which is not a minority position anymore in the country, I think. Do you think that's right?
I think that's right, and I think that there was a facade behind which Israel existed, which was based on the denial of the Nakba, denial of the fact that Israel came and replaced the Palestinians on the land, which is now almost gone, because most people know about the Nakba and realize that Israel had committed a great crime against the Palestinians. And there's no going back on that. And I think that's very important. And there's a moral destruction of Israel from inside, because they have positions that are unacceptable, and their high court and their legal system is being destroyed step by step. And that is very detrimental to the state. And their army also is no longer the same army that it used to be, because now the army is going into combat because they are paid. It's like a mercenary army, because they don't want to go anymore.
Yeah, they get these tokens, the reservists, that are quite big. And of course there is the bulldozer crew, which gets paid for every building they destroy. An Israeli economist was explaining there's the Air Force, which is still sort of this elite. And there is basically the army, which he says is really just, it's a mob. People violate their own rules.
With impunity.
With impunity. So it's hard to see how this can go on. But yeah.
We've come to almost the end of the hour. I think you've got a last reading for us, Penny.
Reggie's going to do
Right,
the reading.
yeah,
I will
yeah.
just, this is really near the end of our book, when we stop in Western Jerusalem to go to the Ramallah cemetery. This is one of the oldest, well, actually, it's been a cemetery since the time of Saladin, and it is a cemetery for Islamic holy men, prominent Jerusalem families, a very, very important site. And after 1967, when the Islamic Waqf came, they started destroying parts of the cemetery. They took away maybe 1,000 bodies to build some construction
And park.
and housing. Yeah,
Park.
yeah. And
Car
then,
park.
so we walked through the cemetery. You can see destroyed tombstones. There's no signs. There's no protection. There's a turbi which has advertising, a Makama Islamic shrine that has advertising stickers on it. I mean, the only hope is the tall trees and the birds. But then you come to another construction site.
As we looked up at the forbidding facade of a building supposedly dedicated to tolerance, it became clear to us that confronting the denial of the experiences of the other, as well as connections lost, remembered, present, and threatened, are what unites our explorations. Some connections have been lost for centuries, but speak of a time when our region was crisscrossed with pilgrims, adventurers, and commercial travelers from Baghdad and Istanbul to Haifa and Acre. Other connections are lost in our troubled present, such as the absolute refusal by Israel to acknowledge the Nakba. Ruins whisper of a more ancient times, whether the Byzantine ruins in our own Ramallah neighborhood of Tire, or the intricate Bronze and Iron Age water systems and wine storage vaults unearthed by archaeologists on a hillside near Jib village, now a name of an Israeli checkpoint. Layers of peoples and civilizations to be cherished rather than reduced to one simple story.
Raj and Penny will be upstairs signing copies of their books, and you'll have a chance to talk more to them then. But it's been an enormous privilege for us, I think, in this room to have Raja and Penny here. And please just join me in thanking them and wishing for better times. Raja and Penny.
Thank you. Thank you.
So really, thank you everybody for coming along, and Jenny, really thank you for chairing us. We were very fortunate.
Thank you, Jenny.